Hey guys, my name is Nick and welcome back to the channel, and we continue with the Nemesis Warbringer Titan build. And in this one we are looking at the main weapon of this Titan, and that is the Quake Cannon. So this is the stupid large compensator class anti-Titan weapon that sits on the carapace of the chassis. So let's get straight into the video. So this is the typical Forgeworld box that we get for our weapon systems for the Titans. So we can see here, you know, the barcode, Q code, and the description on the box. So once we've got that box undone, we can see all the parts. Now what I've done is gone ahead and cleaned all the parts up pretty much as best possible, and then just laid them out in a relatively logical fashion so that we can see in the parts list to make sure that everything is as it should be. And you can see there we've got this large base plate. It's basically like a large 6-shooter revolver that fires these massive Quake shells. So the first thing we're going to build are the ammo loaders. Now these are like an ammunition hopper, and they come with these little crane parts that enables it to lift out these shells and then load them into the barrels of the revolver. There are 2 of these. They don't actually fit onto the Quake Cannon from what I can tell directly. They fit onto the main back chassis of the Nemesis itself. So yeah, these don't all necessarily go together from what I've been able to tell so far. So what I'm going to do is just sort of test fit the parts, make sure I'm going to be happy with what's load bearing, what's not load bearing, mix and match between the super glue and the JB Weld, as is usual with my Nemesis or any other kind of large Titan resin model build. You can see here as it's sort of beginning to test fit, make sure that everything's cleaned up, and I can work out where the most effective use of the glue is going to be. Now in this case I'm going to be gluing this particular component on using super glue. So as usual I score every component so that the glue has got a bit more surface area, a bit more purchase to make when it gets put together. And once I'm reasonably happy that the join is as flush as it can be, it's time to break out the super glue and just get these components sorted out. So you can see here where I've scored each of those resin parts, I'm just going to apply some super glue along the 2 sort of thin edges as well, so we've got a good surface bond, and then connect that to the main ammunition hopper. You can see just about on that left component half a Quake shell, so it's kind of in a sort of a drum magazine style, and then the crane piece will fit onto the top of this. So just give that a little squeeze, make sure the glue starts to go, and then we can move on to the next parts. Now we have a small piece on the front that's going to go on here, so once again I've already scored that, so all I'm going to do, in fact I haven't scored it at all, I'm lying, I'm just going to score it now and then attach that. There's only a small surface area on this piece at the very low end of that sort of curved area there. So I didn't want to score everything, otherwise that will be shown in when it comes to painting. So just be careful, always make sure you test fit so you know where you've got to score, where it's going to be, the adhesive is going to be applied to. So that piece just goes on the front like that, and we can move on to the next stage. So the next stage is this small piece of detail that goes on the side here. I've already pre-scored it this time, definitely, as I've just edited that bit out of the video. This just fits on the side like so. Basically it sort of covers a couple of joins really, but it doesn't really show much purpose other than just sort of adding some detail. But there is a little recess, just press that in, and then we can move on to the crane section. Just so that I'm sure everything is drying correctly, all I'm going to do is just apply an elastic band around this, tried and trusted thick elastic band, just to make sure that everything is sort of drying under a little bit of pressure, so that nothing sort of, you know, there was a little bit of popping out is the best way of describing it. So where the parts are not 100% flush, and it's very difficult to sort of make them, you know, make them super flush. I don't know if that's making any sense, because the more you take off it, the more damage you're doing to it, and the more awkward the fit becomes. So all I've done is just under a bit of pressure, just let the glue take the strain as the parts begin to dry. So that's all I'm doing there. So with that main ammunition drum beginning to dry, we can move on to this crane piece. You can see this little bit is slightly warped. A little bit of hot water treatment will soon sort that out, and I'll do that off camera once all the components have been built. So there's a little hinge section here. The instructions do tell you to draw it flat because it makes a lot more sense. It also means that the pieces will be a bit more stable if you do it this way. So there's a number of components here. We've got sort of another hinge piece here. This is notched so you know which way round it goes, and then that leads on to sort of a claw arm kind of thing that attaches to the actual shell that's going to be sort of free floating. And you can be a bit more creative with this, but I'm being quite boring. So all I'm going to do is build this, pretty much as the instructions state on both sides, as it makes a little bit more sense when it comes to put the whole lot together. So again, still sticking with the super glue into that hinge joint, press that crane arm into place, and then we can move on to the smaller sections. Giving these a quick little score in here as usual, just to give the smaller surface area a bit more purchase as that glue is applied. So now that's done, just apply a small piece of super glue. A piece of super glue? What's a piece of super glue? A small dollop of super glue, and then just get this small notched section, which just basically is like an L shape or an L shape connector piece, and then we can attach. There's a lower section to this, which then attaches to the rear of a Quake shell. And once we're ready with the pre-scoring already done, again, a small amount of super glue and get that small claw arm into place. You can see there, it's just, again, it's notched as well. There are a left and a right-sided piece of this, so you need to make sure you get the right ones, and then that's pretty much it. The next section is one of the Quake shells itself. There is a small piece that goes on the back of that, which attaches to that crane arm that I've already just attached onto the main crane arm. So just a small piece that goes on the back there. Again, I'm going to be attaching this via super glue. There is a small ball joint and then sort of 4 little notches, 4 little elongated sections, sort of fit into the exhaust of the rocket-propelled Quake shell. So just super glue the back of that on both sides in this case, just because I wanted to make sure that it kind of... I find sometimes that applying super glue to both surfaces actually helps the drying process. I'm not quite sure whether that's a placebo effect or whether you guys out there have a similar kind of methodology. And once that's glued and secure, you can see exactly how this now bolts onto the back of this sort of claw arm as part of this loading feature. So what we can do, just sort of roughly show you there, that fits on the top like that, and you can see basically the magazine itself, you've got sort of half a shell that you can just about see, but once you put this one in you can't see it. That sort of fits in like that, so it's almost like there's sort of 3 or 4 extra shells inside each of these left and right magazine hoppers. There's a little loading arm, and that will reload the cylinder of the main gun. So I've gone ahead and built the left and right hoppers there. They're basically exactly the same build, right? So just a left and right. So we can move on while those pieces are drying onto the main cylinder and the main weapon itself. You can see here there's this, basically a revolver cylinder, and I think that's what they're called, aren't they? Cylinders. And there's a front and a rear section which shows the Quake shells in place. You can see there sort of the tip of one, and then sort of the exhaust system of the rocket propelled shells on the other side. And then basically like a giant hammer, I guess that really is, if you were thinking of Smith & Wesson style 6-shooters. So what I'll do is score each of these again. It's a simple methodology, super glue and scoring once again, and just get each of these in place. What I'll do is I'll do the first one, and then when we come back I'll have done the rest. So with the super glue in place, it's just a case of dropping these little shell tips into the cylinder itself, and then just making sure that is flush and straight, because it's basically a ball and socket almost as well. So you could end up with them being slightly skewed, but obviously you want to make sure that the shell tip is pointing forwards correctly. And that's pretty much it. So it does fit in quite nicely, but just be careful that your glue doesn't dry with them at a funny angle. Well, I've gone ahead and done the other 5 that you can see. Obviously it's a 6-shooter, but you don't see the others because of the detail of the barrel and the rifling and all the other components. This piece fits on the back like so, and there's going to be some sections now where I'm going to switch back to my beloved JB Weld rather than super glue. A lot of it's load bearing or gravity bearing, as it were. It's quite heavy lumps of resin, so we'll cover some of those as we go through. So a quick dab of JB Weld, and all I'm going to do is let that dry under a clamp, which perfectly fits just like that, and put that to one side so we can move on to the next section. The next section is going to be the main part of the gun. This is kind of the barrel here and the large compensator looking piece on the very end. So this is a 2-part, and as I said, this is going to be a JB Weld build, and then we can put the cylinder just as a test fit so you can see the size of the weapon like so. So you can see how the round is sort of loaded into the back and then chambered into the, I guess it's some kind of accelerator firing mechanism, and then the barrel goes on the end. But before we get to that stage, all I'm going to do is put some of the little detail hosing pieces on. So these have all been cleaned up. All I'm going to do is super glue these. I think there's 3 hoses in total, a left and a right and a centre one. And we'll get those on before we move on to the next stage. With the left and right hose bundles attached, it's just a centre hose section here, just to go on like that. Again, if your components are warped, mine were not, which was quite lucky. Just a bit of hot water or a hairdryer will sort those out. I do actually prefer the hot water than a hairdryer personally. It's a little bit more controllable. And all we've got to do is just glue that into place like so. What I'm going to do now is just sort of test fit the next sections. Now these are the bits that make the weapon elevation sorted out, so these sort of rotate up and down, so you can have it pointed more horizontally or more towards the vertical. I've seen a few people that have magnetised at this stage, so they can have it in a couple of different positions, so they can have it, you know, more pointing upwards, because this weapon does fire indirectly, so it looks quite cool pointing in a direction like an artillery piece. So you can see here how much elevation there is. Although that will change once you've got that cylinder piece on the back. That will reduce the amount of elevation that you have. But once it's on that mounting plate, there is a gap at the back, so you can see that it will kind of elevate pretty much the full amount there, really. But you just need to make sure that before you glue anything together, that you test fit and make sure that you're not going to put it into a position that won't fit once you go onto the mounting plate. So we can now switch back to these side pieces now that I know exactly how they're going to go. They are left and right keyed. You may need to make a note of that. They are written on the area that you use for the adhesive, that they do say left and right. We're going to switch to JB Weld for this, as it is all load bearing and gravity weight bearing. So I've just got some that I've put into this little plastic, I think it was the plastic that the JB Weld actually came in, either that or the super glue. It's perfectly useful for this. Just give that a mix up, and still using my favoured method of applying it, and that is a Q-tip or a cotton wool bud. And now we know exactly where these are going to go. I'm just going to, you know, sort of put this stuff onto both sides. There's quite a lot of surface area here, just making sure that I've got my left and right sorted out here. And they do fit in quite snugly. They don't, there's not free rotating here. They do kind of fit. There's like a half semicircle at the top that that you need to worry about. So I'm just double checking here where this adhesive can actually be applied to. So all I'm going to do is just liberally apply this stuff all over the areas where they're going to be surface joining. As usual, applying this stuff on both of the mating components so that there's a good join being formed. Just making sure that I get that in the right place, and you can see I've already done that on the rest of the main barrel, or the main component itself. You can see I've given that a good dollop of this stuff, and then just carefully applying this around the mounting points here, and then pressing these two pieces together so that we get a good firm bond. So once we're ready to go, just take the two components here. As you can see that I've got that all sorted out, and we just click those into place. Give them a little twist to make sure they're in the right place, and then that's pretty much it. So what I'm going to do is do the other side of this as well, and then what I'll do is I'll probably clamp these two together so that they dry under a bit of pressure. Just cleaning up a couple of bits as you go around these kits. You do find little bits that stick out. And then what we'll do is we'll just do the other one, and then when we come back we'll move on to the next section. Actually, I discovered during that process that the clamp was actually pulling down on one of the angles of those discs, so it wasn't actually particularly useful. So I've got another method that I'm going to show here. So all I'm going to do is actually attach this the barrel tip section into the weapon. Again, this is keyed to, and it does go one way round. You can see that sort of notch at the bottom there. So I've got this leftover JB Weld mix already, so I'm just going to liberally apply this. Be quite generous with this end, because this is, I guess, the end you'll probably pick the weapon up with as you attach it to the Titan and so on, especially if you're keeping it completely detached from the main chassis, which is something that I'll probably do for transportation reasons. So make sure you give that a good liberal dose. You could pin this. I did contemplate the idea of pinning, but I thought, you know what, it's not like it's going to be, you know, used and abused very much. Typical Forgeworld models tend to spend more time on the shelf than on the battlefield. So JB Weld was perfectly fine for this. So once we've got those components all ready to go, I'm going to go back to that tried and tested elastic band method. With the components ready to go together, just a final little amount of JB Weld there. I did try and test fit this. There is a little bit of a cavity in the process here where the mating joins don't completely go flush, so I did pack that out a little bit more with this stuff just to give it a better purchase. And all I'm going to do now is use this tried and tested elastic band method over the end of the barrel tip, and then this will also hold those two circle pieces in place as well. And you can see here the net result of that now, so that everything here is now sort of going to dry and sort itself out under pressure, and we can put that to one side to completely cure. Now it sort of goes off after about 30 minutes, but it is still manipulatable, is that a word? In that pace, I'd probably suggest that you leave it for a good 24 hours to fully cure, and then it'll be a rock solid. Just trying to work out how best to do this, and just sticking it in a mug like that will be perfect. There's actually a couple more pieces we can attach to this while that is all beginning to dry. There's this piece that goes underneath here, which is basically some kind of sighting system. It's got a little sensor on the very end anyway. I guess this is part of the computer cognitator generating device that feeds back to the gun crew, so they know exactly what elevation the weapon's going to be set to. Again, this is kind of a very fragile piece. It only has one mounting point, which is at the sort of the base of the barrel tip itself. So again, just to make sure that I'm happy with the bond on this, instead of using super glue, I'm going to use this stuff again and put that on. And there's a couple of other pieces that we're going to super glue on as well, and then we'll be good to go and leave that overnight. With that weapon now set overnight, it is rock solid, and give it a good twist. That's not going anywhere. So all we can do now is we can attach the cylinder piece to the back of the weapon. And you can see it just sort of connects on two lug points there, and because it's quite a heavy lump of resin, I'm going to use JB Weld rather than super glue. Again, you could pin this. In fact, you could run a pin pretty much from barrel tip all the way to cylinder tip, if you were really quite paranoid about it, or you don't use this particular stuff. But for me, this works perfectly adequately. So all I'm going to do is in those connection points is put this stuff on both sides, on the receiving side and on the other mating part of the component, squeeze them together, and again let these dry rock solid overnight. So as you can tell, this video has actually taken about 3 days, or at least 2.5 days to get to this stage. I mean, it takes a while to clean up, and then these drying processes take a fair amount of time. So you can appreciate the level of effort that goes in just to putting one gun together. So I've pressed the cylinder into the back of the main weapon itself, and again I'm going to crack out that wonderful elastic band. This is my favourite thing in the entire world right now. I don't have a clamp big enough to go through the length of the weapon, so this will have to do just nicely. If you've got some larger clamps, I've got some big clamps, but even then not quite long enough, so a good elastic band will do the job. There was a little bit of wiggle on this, to be honest, on the two components. So making sure that this is completely flush. You can see me sort of testing it and looking at the different angles to make sure that it is lined up, because once this goes, you're not going to be undoing it without cutting it. So it wasn't quite right, so there was a little bit of sort of left hand down, as it were. But before this goes, you need to make sure you get this bottom cylinder support piece in place, otherwise you won't be able to squeeze this component in. There's two sort of little bits there which are gyroscopes or something, I can't remember the name of the components, but this sort of piece that I'm going to attach here needs to go in now, whilst you can still move that cylinder in place, because there's two sort of connecting points and you need to sort of pull the cylinder away from the main barrel to fit this piece in. So you can see me just sort of test fitting it there, but with the elastic band in place, this is the perfect time to do it. So I can apply some adhesive, get that in place. That gives us the full support that we need for that cylinder, and then we can attach the other two pieces via super glue. There's nothing to worry about on those pieces, and then we can leave it to dry, but I want to make sure that it does dry straight. So in order to help it dry straight, because it is slightly wonky, not by much, only by a couple of degrees, I'm actually just going to put in a couple of blue tack wedges, and these will help it perfectly dry straight. So all I'm going to do is just sort of mess around here until it's perfectly straight with these blue tack bungs in place, and then I'll be more than happy for that just to cure overnight. So while the main barrel is drying, we can move on and do a couple of bits on the base plate, and that is to attach these 4 safety rung things. So you can see on the base plate there's these 2 sort of access hatches that are there and one on the other side, and that's for the crew to get onto the viewing platform for this weapon. So the Mechanicum have, in their health and safety view, have given the gunnery crew that go up onto this platform that fires this, you know, massive Titan cannon shell thing, which I'm sure isn't very quiet when it fires, and they've given them some nice little safety balustrades that they can hold on to when they go through the hatches. I think that's really considerate of the Mechanicum when they're building these Titans, to think of that whilst they go up there, and then probably from the shockwave and the blast and the noise of the gun probably lose their mind, head and ears. But yeah, something I found rather comical is to have these sort of safety pieces attached to the hatch to let them get up, but not worry about any other of the factors of standing on this platform while this gun fires. I think it's a bit ridiculous. But there we go, they come with the kit, so they're going on to the model. So there we go then, guys, that is the Quake Cannon unboxed and built as far as I can really take it before we start working on any magnetisation or any painting. So I do want to make sure that I keep it as separate as possible so I can paint it more effectively and hold it more effectively and all that kind of stuff, so that I can get it into the airbrush booth and then sprayed up. So that's going to wrap this video up, and hope you enjoyed the unboxing and build stages so far. If you did, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and I shall catch you guys on the next video.